Hello, leadership team of Carbonis. My name is CARICA, and I know some of you and others of you I just haven't had a chance to meet yet. But I have so enjoyed our conversations of just getting to know who you are, your goals for the company. I've loved hearing your passion in the restaurant industry and how you just want to create such an amazing experience for every single one of the people who visit your location. So it's just been a joy for me, and I thank you for allowing me to talk with you and sort of present you with where we're at now, where we want to be, and then maybe some ideas of how we can get there. So let's just dive in. Currently, we know that the Willett brothers established this particular location of Carbonis in 2011. And right now, Rachel and Kevin are co-general managing it. And then we have one front of house supervisor, Kara, and one back of house supervisor, Joe. And underneath you guys are 45 employees. And that is a lot of people to manage. And last year alone, you did just over $2 million in revenue. And so, of course, we want to see that number increase. But already, I just want to say great job. That is from the people that I talked to in the restaurant industry for your size of a restaurant. Just from interviewing them and kind of getting to know best practices, that's quite the feat. So congratulations on that. You guys are doing a lot well, and you have a lot that you're managing over. So that kind of leads us into some organizational tensions that maybe we're feeling right now. So like I said, I had the chance to interview some of you and interview some of your employees that you guys felt really understood the culture best or had been there the longest. And through those conversations, there were 5 things that really rose to the surface as tensions that just kind of, they were all over the place. And so one of those is lack of role clarity and organizational vision. So really at every level, including the leadership level, people didn't really know what they maybe knew what their role was, but they didn't know how far it extended. So a cook certainly knew like his job was to make food, and a manager certainly knew that they needed to keep schedules full, that payroll needed to continue, the basics, but they didn't know how far does my role go and where does it stop, and then where's our organization as a whole heading. So the good news is that as I was doing some research on this, a Gallup poll recently showed that only 28% of people in the hospitality business do know what their organization's vision is, where their organization is heading, and what they're about. And so you're in great company with other restaurants in the industry. It's just really hard to find the time to articulate that vision when the pace that you guys live at is just go, 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 go all the time. The second thing that was an overwhelming tension was a lack of empowerment. And I think that too just happens when there's high stress, and then when people just don't really know exactly what their role entails and what it doesn't entail. And so those two really run hand in hand. The third area was a lack of accountability. So some staff and some of the leadership team felt like different people could get away with different things depending on their position or how long they had been around. And that really leads into tension number 4, which is low morale. When people feel like other people aren't being held accountable to their job, especially if it's the same as theirs or similar, then it kind of translates naturally just into, well, what value do I really add then? If so-and-so can kind of do this and that, if they're not completing tasks on time, they're not following through with the projects that we're working on, or they just kind of are putting out substandard work and they always show up late, or they're just not very professional with the customers, but I'm doing all of those things, then why am I really even here? Am I needed? Am I valued? And so morale just goes down across the board in that area. The 5th tension that I was hearing was that there's kind of an unhelpful organizational structure currently in place. And I've heard that there have been multiple changes over the past few years. So again, that's very typical. when we look at any organization with a lot of changes, sometimes organizational structure, as we try to maintain people and not let them go just because maybe their position isn't needed, we sort of can tack on these roles where we want someone to feel like they're really wanted and we want them to stay, but it's just not so helpful for the organization's goals overall. So some of the things I think would be great examples of these above tensions are just, we have a high turnover in our kitchen staff. The front of house staff, the serving staff, are doing a great job kind of forming their own culture. And there hasn't been too much turnover there. They all very much respect their superior. They feel like they can speak freely with her. But the kitchen staff, on the other hand, feel like they're a dime a dozen, that they're needed insofar as what they can do, but there's nothing that they personally would bring to the job. And so, of course, morale will go down with that. And then communication between management and employees, because of just the high, fast-paced culture, that's always going to be a tension. But there's definitely things that we can do to work on that. And then employees were just unable to articulate a clear vision of where the business is heading, or really any company-wide goals. And I think that that often happens when we're just trying to maintain, right? We're just trying to get through the day, serve the customers well. It's hard for us to take a break and step back and breathe and then know, hey, how can we set really helpful goals? So I'm pleased to be able to help you with that a little bit. And so as I was talking with you, I kind of created 6 goals that I felt like were the most important of all of the problems that we do have. There's sometimes so many that it just feels overwhelming and we can't fix everything at once. So if we have to focus on a few for the year 2020, here's what I think that we should highly consider focusing on. So the first is that every employee needs to be able to articulate why Carboni's is in business and how his or her role is vital to that vision. This is going to just increase the morale of the team, and then also they're going to feel like there's a fire under their belly as we continue to do this over and over again of what they contribute and why they actually are contributing it. That their job in particular is actually helping to press the vision forward and meet our goals. The second goal that I think we should have is for every employee to be able to articulate what decisions they can make autonomously and which decisions need higher level approval. So if a customer is just really not satisfied with their meal, can that waiter or waitress just make the decision to comp the meal or comp something, or do they need the manager to step in? And then does that manager, can they make that decision without ever telling their supervisor or the owner, or is that something that the owner would like to have eyes on at the end of every month? So these are things that need written out clarity in order to provide the level of security that I think all the employees and the leadership team are looking for. The third goal would be that every employee can think of one time in the past year when the owner directly expressed his pleasure in an action that he or she took, either writing or verbally. This is really important because in any organization, no matter how big, we want to know that our supervisor appreciates us and that they want us around and that there is something that we offer. And so because Matt has such a hands-on relationship with the employees, and he's there almost every day, it sounds like, and really kind of all over the place. He's in front of house, back of house. Everybody just gets contact with him, but they know that he's the owner. And although he knows that there are maybe 1 or 2 levels in between him and that employee is still craving that feedback. And that's just a natural thing that all of us would want. And so taking the 2 seconds to just say, hey, Amanda, I saw that you really served this customer well, that you went above and beyond. And I'd love to be able to share that at our next staff meeting and just talk about how that really lit up that little girl at the table, lit up her eyes, and her mom just felt, calm. And that's just the kind of environment that we want. So that really only takes a minute or 2 to say, but in the situation that you guys kind of painted for me, the picture of what the current culture is like, it sounds like that would go so far. So it's a small thing, but it would have such a great impact. Then the fourth goal that I heard each one of you articulate, which is kudos to you, but also your employees, all say was that there was a lack of trust between leadership and management, and that even the employees were kind of feeling that tension. And so that trust just needs to increase. So that would be, I know that kind of sounds like a vague goal, but that's something that's super important for the people, maybe, your core level employees, to know that their supervisor is fully trusted by the owner. The fifth thing that we should be working on is a professional culture of timeliness, hospitality, and integrity. So that really needs to be built. And I think, again, there are some really simple things that we can do to increase that. And I'll be sharing those with you in just a little bit. But it's something that each one of you said that you wanted. And some of the waiting staff also, when I talked with them, they expressed that that's something that they wish that their coworkers had a little bit more of. But because there just isn't a comprehensive policy or kind of guidebook in line, and it's really more about a learn on the job, a hands-on kind of onboarding, then it's hard for us to be able to, show our employees something and say, hey, this is really what we expect. And then especially if we're not getting that in front of them all the time, people need to hear it until they're making fun of you for saying it. And I know it feels so awkward as a leader to be able to do that, to say, hey, we really want to provide our customer with this kind of experience, and just say over and over again. It feels awkward to say, but people need to hear things at least 7 times in order to believe it and really take it to heart. And a lot of times it's more than that, especially in the restaurant industry when it feels like you have 1,000 voices that are coming at you. It's hard to know, what's the biggest priority. The last goal that I think that we should talk about in our meetings moving forward is how to create a sustainable management structure. And this is tricky because you guys have had a lot of change in the last few years when it comes to even your owners. One of the owners kind of stepping down, the board, and then the management in general. You want to keep people on, and you want each other to know that you're valued, but sometimes it's hard when you end up with this sort of conglomeration of roles that just maybe aren't the most helpful. And so we should be talking about how can we switch that around so that there's a streamlined structure, and waiting staff and cooking staff just know who to go to for what, and it doesn't feel too overwhelming or like they need to tell 2 bosses or 3 bosses in order to make sure that they've covered all of their bases. So now we get to dive into just some proposed strategies. So while I had the chance of talking with you and sort of reviewing what our goals are, where we're wanting to be, I realized that I needed to learn a lot more about what successful restaurants are currently doing. And so I had the chance to meet with a couple of the waiters at Spoon and Stable, which is a very prominent restaurant in Minneapolis, and then one of the cooks at the Bachelor Farmer, and then a bartender at Marvel. And so those are 3 restaurants that are doing such a great job in Minneapolis. They're all in the North Loop area. And so I just asked them, like, hey, if here were my goals for a restaurant, what do you guys have right now in place that maybe would help answer those questions or help with that and establish those things? So some of this is from some books that I'm going to share later on, and some of this is from them. So the first thing that I think that we should really consider doing is to have every employee, even though I know that there's 45 of you, take the StrengthsFinders test and then share your results throughout the year. You don't need to have one big meeting where you're sharing everyone's results at one time. And this doesn't even necessarily need to be in a meeting format. This could be in your weekly email communication to staff members. It could say, hey, we're going to highlight Amanda this week, and here's her 5 strengths. And if you see her kind of implementing any of these, you should let her know that that's needed and appreciated. So that's something that employees can do on their own time. Most employees are really excited to do that. Or, you could set up a computer and just say, tack on an hour to everyone's schedule over a month's period, and then have them take that. And so that book here it looks like this. So if you haven't taken this, I highly suggest that you do as a leadership team, that you talk through it. But I also think that'd be really great for your employees to feel like when they're coming on board to Carboni's as a family-owned and operated restaurant with a rich history, that we want to invest in who they are and study them and then use their strengths to the best of their ability. We want to take advantage of that in a healthy way. So the second strategy that I think that we could look into is behavioral standards really need to be written out. They need to be posted, and there does need to be some kind of policy that we've actually placed into action where it's not just this endless cycle of like, hey, I told you, oh, I told you again. And so many companies have a 3-strike policy where it's, you're going to have a warning, and then we're going to have a serious sit-down conversation about this. And then the last time is going to be a final warning of, if this ever happens again, then we don't have, this isn't the kind of environment that we're wanting to set. So it's not healthy for you. If this kind of behavior continues to come out, but it's also not healthy for the rest of the staff that's here. So that would be something that's really, it doesn't take a ton of time, but I think it's actually something that your staff are hungry for. They want to know, hey, what is expected of me exactly, and what can I expect of my coworkers? The third thing is that leadership always needs to lead by example. And so that means they take the heat and they pass on the praise. And several of you are even articulated that to me when we met. Of course, when something goes wrong with your waiter or your cook, or the food comes out wrong, that's your job to go out to the customer and express, an apology. But we also need to pass on the praise. And so that's something that I didn't really hear too many employees say that they felt like happened often, and not something that I heard from you guys as things that you're used to doing. And so we can definitely get better at that. The fourth thing that I think we should do is have monthly kind of staff morale surveys almost, where we can say, hey, before receiving your tips or your checks at the end of the month, we need you to just take 5 minutes or less, actually, and keep it so small. Keep it like a 5-question maximum on the survey of just, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much, or 1 to 5, how much are you enjoying your job? And then, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you feel appreciated by your superiors? And then just an open-ended spot for, do you have any concerns about your job, your coworkers, the direction of the company? And then an open spot for, what are you appreciative of? Is there, a coworker or a supervisor who's really gone above and beyond? Is there something that we've started doing that's really working well for you and motivating you? And so that's just 4 questions right there, and only 2 really are mandatory, but that allows us to have kind of a mark as a leadership team of, hey, if this is where we're starting in January of 2020, of feeling like the employees feel appreciated, or that they feel like they can trust us, where are we at in December of 2020? And so that's really helpful. But then it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it allows those employees an area to say, I don't feel like this person is being held accountable for this action, and I would really like to see that happen without there being any possible way for it to come back to them. So there's no negative repercussions, really. And then also it helps us just cultivate this culture of praise and appreciation, and here's what's going well, and I love that this person took my shift, and especially if those are posted somewhere, if they're posted in the staff workroom, if they're talked about maybe at a huddle, which we'll discuss later on, that goes such a long ways. The 5th thing that we need to do is, especially since we have such high turnover in the back of house with the kitchen, we need to hire based on values. And that's so important. I know that it can feel super stressful when you're down on your schedule and you just need bodies, to be honest. but bodies are only going to be there for a few months. And if we're not hiring people based on the values of Carbonies, of creating that family environment, of giving the customer an experience that is above and beyond, that feels just as comfortable as them being in their own home without any of the stress of being in their own home. If we're not really articulating that in the hiring process and hearing that from the people who want to work for us, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to show that later on. So we need to hire based on values. The sixth strategy that I think we could do is have a policy formed that is relating to mandatory time off after an employee puts so many hours in within a pay period. We know that we're dealing with being short-staffed right now, or with people just kind of overlapping too much in one area but not enough in the other. And when someone feels like their superior only cares about the work that they put out but doesn't care about their personal life or their family work balance, that can really grate on you over time. And we want our restaurant industry, again, to feel like that family. And I was hearing that over and over again from these restaurants that I was talking to in Minneapolis, of just, they feel like their supervisors care about them and care about their family, and that's an extension really of the restaurant's family. So I think that would go a long way. It also really helps with burnout. People are a lot less likely to quit if they feel like they see a light at the end of their horizon, that they're going to also be held accountable to taking enough time off, or getting a break in between really, really long shifts or multiple days of long shifts. And then lastly, I think that it would be really wise to restructure management. In talking with you guys as a leadership team, and then also in the restaurants that I discussed this with, for your size of restaurant, one GM really is appropriate, and then having an assistant general manager would be really necessary for that. So one GM, and then an assistant manager, then one front of house manager, and either an assistant manager for the front of house or an assistant supervisor, and then one back of house manager and assistant back of house manager. And as I was kind of looking through your finances a little bit, it does actually seem doable to do this. It just means not having quite as much margin as maybe you were looking at having in 2020. But because of one of the owners stepping back and just some other changes, it seems like this could be possible. And I think that even though we'd be cutting it pretty close financially, the payoff would be tremendous, because supervisors wouldn't feel so, I mean, what I was hearing from you guys over and over again was how stressful of a job this is. And just every single one of you said that. And you can, you knew that this was true for your peers as well, and even for the employees underneath you. And so when we feel like we have some backup, like a manager can take time off because there's an assistant manager there in place, even if we don't need the time off, it's just so, it lifts this burden mentally knowing that we could take it. So that's something I highly suggest that you guys look into. And then, as I've kind of mentioned before, there's just some industry strategies that I think are really wise. And so one thing that I heard from the Bachelor Farmer and from Spoon and Stable was that all of their staff have a pre-shift all staff huddle, and it's led by leadership. So it's led by the manager on duty. It's 5 minutes or less. It's not very long, but that the organization vision is shared. So what are the goals that they're working on that month? What's like the one thing that they're focusing on? You know, is it making sure that every customer feels extremely welcomed at the beginning, and then said goodbye to, and that, you know, we want them back again at the end? Or are we working on promoting our catering, something like that? So what is the goals, and then just the overall vision? You know, what are we doing? We're creating a family environment here. And then at that same pre-shift huddle, behavior was called out that was good. And that's something that I saw a lot in this book, Thanks for the Feedback, The Science of Receiving and the Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well. And so this is by Sheila Henn and Douglas Stone. And Sheila talks, I had a chance to listen to her speak, and she talks a lot about just, we need to model asking for feedback as leadership. but then they need to trust your motivation behind that. And so when we call out good behavior, that goes a long, long way. So the second thing that I heard kind of talked about at Marvel actually is that they have biannual employee appreciation events. And I know that you guys knew one in February, I think it is. But maybe having a couple would be really good. One, because of just turnover. That way, when a staff comes on, it's not too long. It's not a year until they get to experience kind of the culture of just having fun with their staff team. But also, the summer's beautiful here, and then the winter's super boring. And so it's good for us to just go out and have a boat day or have a staff holiday party, you know, in January. And the thing that all three of these restaurants that I talked to do is that they actually pay employees to be there. And I know that might feel hard when you just look at your budget, but the return on that of just winning over their hearts and making them feel like they're part of this family, how are they supposed to show their customers that their customers are part of a larger family if they don't even feel like they're a part of a family? And so each one of those restaurants pay employees, like they literally pay them for the time, and then provide free food, free drinks, and then entertainment or a fun activity or something like that. They shut down the facility or they open it late. And so that's something that I highly suggest that you do. Again, I think it would go a long, long way. The third thing that I heard was anonymous suggestion avenues are very, very important. So when at Spoon and Stable, when they first opened, there's certainly this period of like trying to establish trust. And when you're trying to establish trust, it's hard to just ask somebody like, hey, just talk to me face to face about it. And so they had anonymous suggestion boxes where people could put that in a room where there is no monitoring. It's low traffic. And then that way the owner and the general manager could go through that and kind of address it and then talk about it at a pre-ship pedal. The last thing that I heard from all three of these restaurants that I talked with is that there was empowerment from the top down. And so the hosts felt like their job was not an extra job, that they had the ability to do whatever it was going to take to make the customers feel amazing from the beginning. If it was a long wait line, they'd go bring them the drink menu and they would serve that drink to them. That the wait staff knew that they could comp a meal if they needed to, that the kitchen staff felt like they could sub out a recipe if they didn't have enough, or they felt like, you know, such and such would be a little bit better. They didn't need to check that with their superior. And so that is just huge. People need to feel empowered, because if they don't feel empowered, they're not going to want to stay. They're going to want to find someplace else where they feel appreciated more, known more, and then challenged really more. So that's super important. As we wrap up this discussion, I would just love to pass on to you some of the resources that I looked into while I was just preparing for this discussion with you, and that I've really found helpful in talking with organizations of several different kinds. So like I said, one is Sheila's book on Thanks for the Feedback. StrengthsFinder by Tom Rath is something that I think every organization really should go through, and I think that would be great for your staff to know what their strengths are personally, feel invested in if you bought these books or those codes for them, but then it's just fun to give a common language for people to share about themselves. Then Influencer is another really great book. And so this also talks about rewarding the right behaviors. So the science of leading change, like how do we do that tangibly? And this is also by the same authors that wrote Crucial Conversations, which is another really good book if you're having to lean into some of those conversations where you are starting to hold people accountable for actions that you don't really want. How do you make sure that they do trust your motivation and know that you want what's best for them? So this one is a really great one. The Ideal Team Player is something that Patrick Lencioni wrote. And this talks about how we want our team players to be hungry, humble, and smart. So we want them to be hungry to grow, to be better at their job. We want them to be emotionally intelligent and smart, and just kind of act professionally, naturally, and to have good relationships with their teams and ask for feedback. Those all fall into the category of smart. And then humble. So we don't want people on our team that just think that they're everything, and we don't want to be that kind of leader ourselves. So I would highly recommend that just as a leadership team, really, and management team, that maybe you go through this, and it can be slow. You could spend a month or two really on each of the 3 areas. But even still, that's a 6-month process, and that really, I think, will help you feel like from the inside out you're able to maybe lead a little bit more authentically and give you some verbiage of how to talk with your employees. The second to last book is called The First 90 Days. I don't have the cover on this one, but it is from Watkins. And that's really meant for an employee that starts on an organization in their first 90 days. But because there's such a lack of trust between core staff and then management, and then different levels within management and leadership, and some of that's due to differing personalities, some of that's due to just turnover or change in the organization recently, I think that this is a great book that talks about short-term wins. And so when you're getting to know somebody, you really need to establish short-term wins, but then a lot of times you just have to work harder so that they know that when you say something, you really mean it, and that they can trust you. So that initial period of building trust is vital. But sometimes we don't think to go back there when we've been working with someone for very long. And I think that the culture right now is really right for that it's okay to go back to the beginning, and that's really great. So that would maybe be a good read. And then the last book is called Leading Change. I am going through this right now in a class that I'm taking on leadership. It's by John Cotter. And in this book, he actually goes through 8 specific steps on how to implement change. And so talking about just setting the stage, is it right for change? And I think you guys are in such a great spot where the staff that I talk to and the leadership that I talk to, you all are hungry for change. You're seeing the same things, which is so good. You don't have to convince other staff members, that there's a problem. Everyone kind of knows what the problems are, and they're open to change. They want change. And so, he talks about that in his first 3 steps. And then he talks about just actually implementing that change and then continuing on in that. And so this is a really great read. Also, Cotter has a lot of great videos out on YouTube if you want to look any of those up. They're pretty inspirational, but give some great tidbits that are tangible. So thank you very, very much for just taking this time with me, allowing me to meet with you and talk with you. And I look forward to our future conversations. I'm learning a lot through this, and I hope that you guys are too. Thanks.